All right, to our fourth video in 3.5, we're looking at identifying your transformations in a function without having to do all your graphs. So what we have here is we're going to put this all together, and we are going to look at the entire function. Here's my adding on the outside, there's my multiplying on the outside. Here we are inside the function. Here's the multiplication to the x. Here's the subtraction. So right now we have four transformations to identify. Now, we're going to put technically a and b, because of the multiplication, you could be multiplying by a negative. So those are going to get doubled. But we're also going to be really interested in what order we should apply our transformations. And that simply comes from your rule of orders of operation. Whatever's inside of the function is first. Multiplying by b comes before subtracting of the c. So the b is going to be your very first place to look. That's number one. Then number two, we're looking at the minus c. We're going to kind of put the whole thing together. Third, we're outside. Multiplying by a comes before addition, so this is third, and this is fourth. Now it looks a little weird because I don't have them in order. There's a method to my madness here. All right, like we said, that's first, second, third, fourth. All right, so looking at the first thing, b, we're inside the function. This affects your x coordinates. Now, there's two things that happened. What if b was a negative? Well, if we multiplied by a negative, you got to go from positive x's to negative x's, so that's flipping over the y-axis. And second, we had the horizontal shrinking and stretching. So by definition, we're going to say if the absolute value of b, which means we're removing the negative sign because we've already discussed that transformation up here. So now if that value is greater than 1, you have a horizontal shrink by the factor of this absolute value of b. And if your absolute value of b is somewhere between 0 and 1, you have a horizontal stretch. Now, second is to look at bx minus c. But before I do that, I really want to look at a. A, again, is a multiplication, but this is on the outside. But there's a distinct pattern between these two. It's going to help on the memorization for this on the test, because this will be on the test. All right, number one. If a is negative, it flips over the x-axis. Notice the number one over here. The y-axis changed to the x-axis, or the x-axis changes to the y-axis. Number two, if the absolute value of a is greater than 1, then you have a vertical stretch. If that absolute value of a is between 0 and 1, you have a vertical shrink. Look at the verbiage. Vertical stretch, horizontal shrink, opposite of each other. Vertical shrink, horizontal stretch, opposite. X-axis to y-axis, opposite, opposite, opposite. So what I have learned over time is that there's usually more a's given out front than there are multiplication of the b to the x on the inside. So my recommendation is to memorize the A rule. And then when you want the B rule, you just take its opposite. Or in reverse, you can memorize the B rule and take its opposite to find the A. Okay, but just remember, B is first, C is third. Now, for the second, come back here, mouse. We look at the whole C. The c being the whole thing on the inside, bx minus c. that completely affects your x-coordinate, even the b on the shifting. So the smartest thing, the goof proof, never make a mistake, always works 100% of the time. Whatever inside the function for your expression, set it equal to 0, solve it for x, add over the c, divide over the b. That answer will tell you which direction to go. That's your sign. And how far you need to go. That will be the value. Safest thing to do when describing your transformation. And then last but not least, in fourth place, D, face value. It's outside the function. It's going to change your y-coordinate for face value. If it's a positive D, it goes up D units. If it's a minus D, it goes down D units. All right. Now, I'm no dummy. If I gave you this example, one, it is pointless to try to ask you to graph this by the transformations. Number one, there's way too many transformations to do. Number two, I know you can just type it into the calculator and graph it. Find the points. I've showed you how to do that. Plot them. You're really not doing any transformations. What I'm going to do is if I give you an equation like this, I'm going to ask you to write down all the transformations in the proper order based on your orders of operation. So again, first, right there, the multiplication of the negative on the x inside the grouping symbol of the square root. All right, so that's my b. It's negative. It flips over the y-axis. That's number one. Number two, take everything inside your grouping symbol, negative x plus 5. Set it equal to 0. Solve it for x. Oh, I'm just going to add the x over to the right. X equals a positive 5. I went to the right 5 units. That's what we're going to write. Give me the direction and then how far you went. Inside is now done. To the outside, multiplication of negative 2. That's really two transformations. This is really negative 1 times 2. Negative 1 is first. Negative on the outside flips over the x-axis. That's number 3. Number 4, the positive 2. The 2 is greater than 1. That's a vertical stretch. A vertical stretch by the value of that 2. You got to put in that number. And then last, outside is a plus 3. That's your D. We're going up 3 units. Now this is a perfect test question. How many points would this question be worth? It's not worth 5. It's worth 6. All right, 1 for the flip, 1 for the shift to the right, 1 for that flip, 1 for that vertical stretch. Come back here. 1 for the up 3. Where's the 6th point? By writing these in the right order, 1 through 5. So you get a point for the order you put them in and listing all 5, 6 things. If you happen to switch around your 2 flips, you lose 1 point only for the order. Okay?